There's a storm across the valley. The clouds are rolling in. The afternoon is heavy on your shoulders. There's a truck out on the 4-lane, a mile or more away. The whining of his wheels just makes it colder.
Welcome to Community Forum. Today is Thursday, February 23rd, 2023. I am Priscilla Almquist-Olsen, your host, and today I have as my guest Reverend Dr. Andrew Tripp, who is pastor of the Easton Unity Church here in Easton on North Main Street, and he has graciously agreed to talk to us about his church and its roots and its current offerings and so forth. So welcome today to Community Forum, Dr. Tripp.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. So tell me a little bit about your background and where you came from and so forth.
I'm originally from Northern New York. Very far northern New York, almost Canada, northern New York. And I had my education, undergrad was in Buffalo, and a brief corporate career that was located out of Syracuse, but I had significant travel, mainly through the Atlantic states. And it was during that time that my engagement with my own church grew and grew. So it felt like I was almost doing the full-time day job to pay for my full-time church work. And I just sensed, a sense of calling. For a couple of years. I'd led the contemporary worship at my congregation back in Syracuse and just felt I should go to seminary and pursue this professionally. And so I went to Boston University for seminary, started in 2006, and in the process, after my Master's of Divinity, continued on for my PhD in practical theology. And it was after I completed that program, a year after I was done with my doctorate, that I interviewed with Unity Church. And I'd been doing hospice chaplaincy during that time. In my time with Unity, I'm part-time there, and I continue to do hospice chaplaincy full-time. And I like the mix of the two.
Oh my goodness! So that is really interesting, and for those of people who are watching hospice's end-of-life care, sometimes people go to hospice centers, but most of the time they receive hospice care at home, surrounded by their loved ones, and there are nurses that come in, and I imagine doctors, and now we know we have pastors who attend to the spiritual needs of those persons who are in hospice care. What do you find so challenging about that particular part of your ministry?
I wouldn't use the language of challenging. It's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. That each day is going to be hard. There's going to be difficult moments and really emotional situations. But I know I'm working with people who are experiencing life in its rawness, both those who are at their end of life, but also their loved ones who are grieving. And you can be a lot more honest and forthright in that situation because time is precious. So you see people really living their lives and taking advantages of the time we do have instead of frittering it away.
Mm-hmm. And so you receive a great deal benefit from this particular service that you provide too. And how is that?
That when you think about the work of ministry, it's meeting people in times of need and connecting them with those spiritual resources that let them find meaning and purpose in their lives. And in end of life care, you get that in abundance, because looking back on your life, those relationships that help sustain you, those virtues that were very important to you, those accomplishments that you hold dear, that gets lifted up, while the fight that you had with your brother on the phone 2 months ago goes to the wayside. The pettiness of daily life goes to the wayside. And so you can focus on what it is that truly matters. And that's something that's profound.
And also, you bring a great deal of peace, don't you, to the person who is undergoing this end-of-life journey. So tell me about Unity Church. And we all know, we who are Easton townies, we all know how the Unitarian Church was founded here in Easton by the Ames family way back in the 19th century, and they are still involved with the church. It's a beautiful, architecturally beautiful church, and those of us who see and go by it every day can attest to the fact that it's truly an astonishing and interesting place, and we're very proud of it here in Easton. So, what are the offerings that you have in that beautiful architectural treasure?
Well, the most frequent offering is our Sunday morning worship, and I invite folks to attend. Please come inside, see the beautiful Lafarge windows with the light coming through, and see them for their beauty, because these are truly historical pieces of art that we have in the sanctuary. And come see the beautiful warm woodwork, the likes of which you don't see in the 21st century, and it's some of the beauty of 19th century craftsmanship. Our worship is for everybody. No matter who you are, no matter what you do, you're welcome. We are a church of inclusion and a church of welcome that says all who come help make the community richer. We also have concerts in our sanctuary, so that way the larger community that may have other Sunday morning commitments can still have access to our space. We act as a practice space for some community music groups, the Jubilate Choir, the Easton Handbell Choir. So there's a lot that happens in the building, but most of all, it's our Sunday morning worship. During school vacation weeks like this week, and during the summer, we also use our church as an additional facility for the Easton Y that does their school vacation camps. So that way members of the community have a safe place for their children when school is not in session.
Oh, that's great. Wonderful. So do you have any outreach programs?
That we do fund and support community outreach. We had been pre-COVID, we were part of a cluster of churches that supported a clothing bank out of a church in Brockton. We support with our Christmas Eve and our Thanksgiving fundraising efforts, food for the Easton Food Pantry and for Wings of Hope.
I see. Wow. Yeah, and Wings of Hope is a suicide prevention organization that was started here in Easton by one of the Easton residents who was impacted personally with that horrible, tragic event. So what do you think are your biggest challenges here in Easton?
That the pandemic hit churches across the country very hard. We've had to figure out technology to be nimble, to have an authentic worship service for a year and a half completely online, and then knowing that a lot of folks who are part of our church community are elderly, who are predisposed to COVID having been much more dangerous than it would be to a younger population. So we committed to having a hybrid worship where we, live on Zoom, have cameras in the sanctuary that broadcast our service so that way people on Zoom can still get that authentic worship experience. But it's letting people know with the vaccines, with new variants having less danger, even if they might be faster to spread, that it is safe to come worship. And we would love to see you on Sunday morning if you want to come and see what our community is all about.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know I've attended funerals at your church, and you give wonderful testimony to the decedent, and it's just a beautiful service with much music and participation by you have a church choir, I believe.
We used to. Now it's shrunken down to a band, but they are still very active, and you can sometimes see them playing in the larger Easton community. I've known that they've had some engagements at Stonehill, some engagements last summer during Pride. So you can see the Unity Church Band locally here in the greater Easton area.
That's wonderful. So that was part of your contemporary service that you did in Buffalo, right?
Well, it was in Syracuse that I was involved
Syracuse,
with
sorry.
contemporary worship.
Right.
And yeah, it's welcoming music that is, from last century or this century versus music that's only from 4 or 5 centuries ago as relevant to the worship experience.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. Yeah. So you've updated, but I'm sure you have a wonderful blend of different music.
Yes.
And you have a great organ.
It is beautiful.
Yeah, and Dick Hill, we miss him so much. Mm-hmm. Richard Hill, he was the organist for many years, and a true gentleman and a magnificent musician. Mm-hmm. But the organ that he played on was also magnificent.
Yes.
And I'm sure that people will be delighted to hear that if they come and attend. So what is your vision for the future?
We welcome being a place where you're allowed to bring your life to church. Your questions, your concerns, your hopes, but also your pains. Knowing that the community is here to support one another. And we would like to see our message of inclusion, our message of welcome get spread.
And I'm wondering, you came to the ministry late, and so you had real world life experiences. Mm-hmm. What impact did those experiences have on your ministry today?
It's a wonderful question. That September 11th happened the September after I graduated from undergrad. And I had numerous friends from college who, it was a state school, so a lot of folks who were paying for their college through either ROTC or Green to Gold or just working in the Guard, who then were activated. And so it was through most of my 20s, I had friends serving in Iraq, in Afghanistan, friends who had served in both the New York and Pennsylvania cleanups as a result of September 11th. And it was seeing the need for connection. Because I had graduated college, I was out working. My first job as a postgraduate was for Lockheed Martin. And it was seeing people who were genuine friends, who I very much loved, have their lives upended. And seeing the continued cost of the global war on terror on an entire generation of people, that made me realize divisions and separations are really problematic for both faith communities and our larger nation. That I've seen a dwindling of compassion and a dwindling of civic engagement nationally. And that's something that as a faith community, I have a real problem with, because values of compassion, of equity, of dignity do not have political lines. And so our growing division in America, I see as something that we as people of faith need to directly address. That people have worth across differences, across opinions, across values, that our fundamental humanity needs to be upheld, and greater civic engagement where the ways we comport with one another, even in our disagreement, needs to improve.
Absolutely. You have, what a wonderful summary of what is truly needed, not just in the faith community, but in the wider community. Absolutely right. And I can just feel that you are doing that in your ministry. That is central to your ministry in many ways. So if that appeals to those of you who are watching today, and truly you have here a pastor who cares and is passionate, but also who understands what your needs are. When you tell him, you got to come and tell him. And so I hope that those of you out there who do not belong to a church or don't faithfully attend any spiritual or religious service, that you will check out one of the oldest churches here in Easton, the Unity Church on North Main Street. And Reverend Dr. Andrew Tripp, you are certainly a man who is someone to listen to, appreciate, and to value what you say. I appreciate so much your being here today. Thank you so much for coming. Any final words?
Oh, it's been my pleasure. And I invite folks to experience the richness of the religious life here in your community of Easton, that the Easton Clergy group does meet together. We discuss concerns going on in Easton and in our larger community, and know that whatever your faith community here in Easton is, you are welcome to visit all of us. That our Thanksgiving interfaith service is something that this community should be proud of. And I know it rotates amongst the different congregations here in town. And I'd invite you to see, because it is a robust faith-based landscape here in this beautiful town.
It certainly is. And I thank you again for joining me today on Community Forum. And until next time, Priscilla Almquist-Olsen, be well.